Hello and welcome back to another video on the Watford Analytics channel. Today we're going to be discussing our next opponents, Blackburn Rovers. In the previous video we discussed Reading, but of course that game was cancelled, so for those of you that watched it, thank you. Unfortunately it was pretty quickly deemed obsolete due to the fact the game was cancelled shortly thereafter, so again, thanks for watching anyway. But today we're discussing opponents for tomorrow, Blackburn Rovers. Should be an interesting game. It'll be a little bit different to what we faced previously, a team that was started pretty well, but been a bit of a more of an up and down, a little bit of a poorer run in recent games. So a lot to discuss there, and also a lot to kind of dig into regards to our teams. A few injury updates we'll get into as well. So we'll discuss the build up to this game and look ahead to how this thing might be won or lost for the Hornets. So we'll head on over to start talking about this a little bit quickly. Alright, so let's start off with the table real quick, just looking at this game heading into it. 6th versus 7th, obviously pretty close in the standings. The record's a little bit different though. I mean, Blackburn losing 4 of the last 5 games. Obviously they got that win in there previously to their most recent loss, but our form's been a little bit more balanced. Obviously draws in there as well as the 1 defeat and 1 victory as well. Watford in better form. It's still relatively close, but are in better form heading into this one. But it's an interesting game. It's one that both teams will be looking as a huge opportunity to kind of jump the other one and just kind of start to keep in those playoff contention places as we kind of slip towards the bottom of those. But again, this is a team that we expected to be around the top with some of the players that are able to retain. Obviously, Bertrand Diaz is the big one, but with John Dale Thomason coming in, it was something a little bit different for Blackburn, and they kind of went out and brought in a coach they felt could elevate the squad, and there are signs that he's been able to do so. Obviously, it's not been consistently good, but still 4 wins, 4 losses, no draws as of yet. Hopefully tomorrow's not the day for them to change that. Hopefully we see obviously a Watford win and we can continue on, but it won't be an easy test, that's for sure. We will talk about the Watford team news real quickly before we get into Blackburn. So Hassan Kamara is a doubt for the game tomorrow, which is troubling. As Ken Sema is also uncertain. So the issue with Kamara here, muscle strain doesn't define which muscle, which it'd be interesting to know. Was it a calf strain? Am I thinking? I'm trying to think of when he came off against Rotherham. Not entirely sure, but I'd like to hear more on that. Obviously, Kamara is an important part of the team, and he's been filling in himself, so issues there potentially. Ken Sema was similarly replaced in the second half in South Yorkshire, and has been nursing a slight groin strain. I mean, he has to play. We have to get on the pitch if we can, unfortunately. So the right back position, the right wing back position is going to be the one that's going to be open. Obviously, Tom Cleverley back training, but not ready to be part of the squad. Imran Loser still working his way back. Doesn't mention Tom Dele-Bashiru, though we did see him training on the grass this week. Again, not with the team yet, but he's out there. He's getting active and getting some ball work in and getting some mobility and stability work back in, which is good to see. But Jeremy Ngakia is available for the Blackburn game, so you'd imagine that he can be rushed straight back in. Sorry, I thought I had a dog noise in the background. Very good. You imagine he's going to be rushed straight back in, and obviously not much time to kind of acclimatise. He's going into the team, you'd imagine, to occupy that right wing back position, which will be interesting because obviously much of this closing window period has been about the right wing back position. It's something that I've been fairly vocal on, and lots of others have been. It felt like it was a position of need, but since the window's closed and no further players are brought back in, it's been discussed that Ngakia was seen as an adequate option there, and that Rob liked him, and the club and Rob together supposedly felt confident in Ngakia's ability to fulfil that role longer term. So it'd be interesting to see. Although having said that, one thing I hadn't considered stupidly was that Mario Gaspar is of course an option at right wing back as well. So perhaps we'll see Gaspar start and then Ngakia maybe on the bench. Who knows? I guess it will say a lot about how he feels about, or how Rob Edwards feels about Gaspar. Should Ngakia start? Maybe the safer option coming back from injury is to start Mario. But we'll see how it pans out. It's an interesting one. So come hour before kickoff tomorrow, that will be the kind of real focal point, the focus point of that of that team will be that position, how it's filled. Of course, elsewhere we've got other players coming in now. Keenan Davis was really good against Rotherham when he came on, made a big difference, and I think that's someone that we hope will be getting a start, or at least I hope, and I'm sure many others do as well. So we'll talk about Blackburn now. Go through kind of their lineup, how they play, what we kind of expect to see. And yeah, it's a little bit different. It's back to a 4-2-3-1 most likely we'll be playing against. They are quite organised off the ball. They can be aggressive, not massively pressure based, but they can be aggressive off the ball. However, they're a team that look to be rigid and organised defensively. They can counter with pace. Playing in that 4-2-3-1, they've got the two double pivots there, and Wharton and Morton. Nice rotational players. The front three are quite narrow. Obviously, Ben Barrett Diaz is a big goal threat for them, and someone they want to get into goal scoring opportunities, and to do so, he's kind of replicating some of what he's done at Malmo and bringing those wider players into those narrow positions. You see the heat map of Hedges there on the right, quite central, as with Diaz as well, picking up the ball quite heavily and kind of cutting inside and getting shots on goal. In the last game, one key pass for Hedges, the goal for Diaz as well. But they're players that you've got to be watching for, as drifting, moving into different positions, and can't allow to take up some of those spaces if you can avoid it. I think the back three is quite a nice matchup, especially with the way the three do get quite narrow. I like those sort of situations where you can use that 3-on-3 and have the ability to support with the wider players from wing back as well. Obviously, Bradley Dack is one you've got to be watching. He's a talented player, had his injury problems, but at 10 he can be quite useful, and can be quite difficult to handle. So the two in midfield really have to do a good job. Our two in midfield have to do a good job of containing him and limiting space where possible, because it can be quite a well-functioning forward line. Hurst was quite inactive against Rotherham. One shot all game, 15 touches over 90 minutes, so it wasn't actually quite 90 minutes, was it? Apologies, but still, it's not ideal. 60 minutes, 15 touches. It's not a great output. They struggled to get him in the game, really. It wasn't one for him. They haven't got a great deal from the bench to draw from. John Buckley is a good player. He's someone that can contribute. Again, he can play in those wide areas too, and look to be kind of a little bit more incisive, inward playing. Offer that kind of inverted role as well when possible. So we'll talk about a little bit. We'll kind of demonstrate what we might see. So I do expect that we'll still be in that three at the back system. That's probably where we're looking to be the most consistent in, like having that three at the back and having those options to play in various ways, whether it be 3-4-3, 3-5-2, and then on occasion maybe we'll see ourselves switch to that four at the back. But tomorrow I'd expect this. We're discussing Gaspar and then Ngakia. The centre-back position is still one that's up for question for me. The central centre-back position, we saw Cavastelli there against Rotherham, and I thought it was quite poor. So bringing Siriata in would be, in my opinion, a positive. Obviously, Courtney House had a good game there, so keep him on the left, and then Cathcart on the right would be ideal based on what we have. The midfield too, I think with those that are available, it's going to be the same. We're going to see Chowdhury and Kayembe. Aspria or Pedro to occupy that role. I think there'll be a temptation with the amount of games he's played. I know it's been a longer break than we expected, but with the amount of games he's played, it wouldn't surprise me if we see Aspria drop to the bench, and I'd be quite excited to see a front three or kind of that triangle of Pedro, Davis and Bayo. I think it'd be quite interesting, but it's also possible that Rob looks for that deeper option of Pedro. But we'll discuss some of the pros and cons of doing so, and why I think we should maybe bring Pedro into that attacking midfield position. But just on Blackburn for a second, I think the key things to focus on are the rotational players and the double pivot there, and the two wide men. When I say wide men, they're coming in pretty narrow for this Blackburn team. So in possession, we've got to be looking at how this midfielders operate. And when we're getting the ball out wide, through the fullbacks do support an attack, not overly aggressive. They do have to provide that width. Although these players can obviously drift and come wide and come back in, they do want to be occupying those narrow positions quite a lot. So rotation-wise, we're getting these midfielders across, we're getting that ball across, and they are looking to switch across paths and find ways to get in possession. They'll take a few risks too. They're not afraid to leave space, and we'll talk about that defensively in a moment as well, but they're not afraid to leave space to get in those rotational positions. You might see it as well from kind of centre backs here. If we are shifting out wide to kind of close those outside passing lanes and ask them to play centrally, we are going to see some drifting in, some rotation, try and get that ball forward. and it's going to be up to us to kind of get sharp and be on them nice and tight, and whether we're pressing for the midfield or getting those forwards working. But finding a way to close these down, whether it be for your attacking midfielder, number 10, or just playing a little bit hard at the pitch, containing them, making things a little bit harder is the key. And also blocking that route of progression. Those midfielders can come wide, or the wingers can come wide, but they do want to be playing in this area. They want to be creating that box. The front two, often at times, can be a front two if Bertrand Diaz comes in. They're kind of creating that box. It's not dissimilar to how we saw Javi Gracia's front four playing at times. When in possession, we are going to see that more narrowing up of the four and creating that kind of box to deal with. And the back three does help you a little bit, as I said. So perhaps that's something we can have some comfort in if they do execute, as we hope they would. But it's an interesting creative option, and when they are in that space here, ideally you're looking for something like this for them. From a Blackburn perspective, you're looking at getting numbers forward and then having that stability behind too, and that's where the creation comes from, the interchange through there. Defensively off the ball, one thing that's kind of interesting, they'll go quite narrow. The fullbacks are happy to sit quite narrow and defend the box as such. Just going to paint a little picture here for you. And what is kind of different at times, not every time, but it's enough to make it somewhat of a trend. So the front three will split a little bit, and the centre midfielders aren't afraid to shift and cover those wide positions and ask one of them to come back and create a little bit more of a different sort of defensive style. So centre midfielders are often defending wider, and even sometimes then the winger coming back inside as well. You might have that shift, and you might have the centre midfielder out on the left side, and then keeping those two a little bit more further forward, and just making it difficult for that line to be broken, and also just a little bit quicker to get players into those wide areas and stop counter attacks, which is obviously a common way of conceding in these sorts of situations. So finding a way to break that, I think it's going to be tempo, exposing the space where you can, if you can, switch it a lot, which can be difficult for us. Momentum and tempo of switching can be an issue, but if we can switch between those lines and kind of bounce those passes through a little bit quicker, then we've got a chance of maybe breaking that sort of defensive style, defensive tactic. And then going to talk a little bit about how we could potentially line up and what we could see as a benefit for us in terms of that shape that they create from the back four. So when we talk about the options we have in midfield and the forward line, we talked about João Pedro up front with, say, Bayo or Davis, and then Asprilla behind, which we've seen work to some degree of success. What we do get in those situations, when Pedro and Asprilla play, we see a lot of this. We see a lot of Pedro popping up around here. We'll just mark these real quick, just to make it a little bit easier. And then Asprilla. So we do see there's a little bit of moving around here, where they're going to come deeper. They're going to go into those wide areas, help support the wing backs. Pedro is more than happy to get in these situations. Now receiving the ball here, we talked about it quite a few times in this on these videos, where he's receiving the ball wide, giving an avenue for the wing back, most often Sema, and you're given opportunities to play. Playing 1-2s, he can come in, draw that space, draw a defender, kind of create these overloads and so on for his players to come and support. So dropping back and being deep is really important for Pedro, and that's another reason why we kind of like him in that starting in a deeper position as well at times, still able to drive forward, but also someone that can support a little bit from further back as well, and his work rate's been good too. Same for Asprilla as well, someone that can roam in those positions and help link up with those wing backs and bring others into play. But for this one, I think I would like to see Davis in there, Bayo. And the reason being, I think we can still get those things from Pedro, which I just outlined. But playing against the back four, I don't think it's as necessary to have two players doing that. That we should be able to find space a little bit quicker than against the three centre-backs. I think it's a game that we can take that risk of having the front two. And with what Davis brings to the team, the kind of hold-up play, the interplay, back to goal sort of stuff he brings, I think having those runs from Pedro, having the movement, he can still drop deep, and he's a great outlet for Pedro, bouncing that ball into Davis As soon as Pedro makes that first pass inside, he's drifting across, he's making those runs, he's committing, and you've got someone who's pretty box active like Bayo, just kind of buzzing around and trying to find space against the back four. I like the numbers, I like the matchup, especially when we also have players like Sema, if fit, that can get forward, can get into the box, and can contribute in those forward areas. So for this game, for me, I think I'd like to see a little bit more of that. Whether or not we get that, I'm not entirely sure, but in an ideal world, that would be the route that I go for this one. So yeah, that's that. We'll talk about, or we'll have a look, sorry, at Blackburn, if I can spell it. Just a couple elements I want to quickly go over. We'll talk about shape, we'll look at the passing network real quick. So passing network is not this is passing network. So again, you're getting that width, pretty deepish line, even when kind of in possession and controlling the game. And then it's, as I said, a little bit narrower in the forward areas. Yeah, Hedges pretty narrow, Diaz and so on. So it's this is kind of what we expect to see. Obviously, losing to Bristol City was not on the plan for them, but it is playing against a three at the back system, similar to ours in a sense. And yeah, I like the matchup. Honestly, even though Blackburn have the potential to be a good team, they have some good players. I think it's a tactically favourable matchup for us. And then we'll just look at the rankings real quick, just to kind of see if anything stands out. I haven't actually looked at the Blackburn rankings yet, but we might as well do it, seeing as we're here. Just bear with me as I get this up. I would do it in advance, but it often has a tendency to reset itself before I get there. So, expected goals. Second bottom, 6.49 XG per shot. Third bottom, 0.91. We're not that far off ourselves. Expected goals against. Okay, this is reverse. Hold on. So defensively, also 12.38. They have conceded 11 goals. Obviously, they've lost a few games as well. Possession-wise, not having a ton of the ball. Pretty average, 49%. Shots per game, shots per 90, averaging lower end, 8.14. Dribbling-wise, should be a little bit higher. Somewhat, but not massively. Touches in the box is always a good one to look at, especially for a team like Watford who has some trouble defending in the box. And they're pretty low down there with us as well. Defensively, we have a look at passes per defensive action. One we like to keep an eye on, how many passes they're allowing. So they're allowing 13 passes, or 13.67 to be precise, per defensive action from the opponent, which is good for us in the sense we are trying to look to control the ball a little bit more. And then construction-wise, so look at deep completions per 90. And actually relatively high up in the deep completions, 8.41 per 90. Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty much the Blackburn team that we're going to be looking ahead to. Again, it's relatively close to the game, being the day before, so I won't spend forever on this. I don't want to keep you too long. I just want to kind of go over some of those main points and just kind of discuss some of the potential things we'll see. So, look forward to talking about the game after it's happened. Hopefully, discussing a Watford win. A lot to go through in the next few weeks. Obviously, the game on Saturday is scheduled to go ahead. Now, I believe we've got an international break after that, so it's going to be a little bit packed and then a break. So. We'll have some stuff to talk about, I'm sure. I look forward to doing so. So thanks again for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Go over to Watford Analytics on Twitter and give me a follow. Feel free to reach out, send me a message if you want to have a chat, discuss anything Watford related or non-Watford related if you want. And I will see you all in the next one. Thank you and goodbye for now.